I want to talk about my life with model airplanes, not my whole life, mind you, but my story of model airplanes and big airplanes. And I was really fortunate to get to grow up in this family, which was a flying family. Both mom and dad were pilots. And in this cool picture, this is not dad's airplane. This is mom's airplane. She and two of her girlfriends from college decided they were going to learn how to fly. So the three of these women bought a J2 Taylor Cub and were learning how to fly in it, and that's how she met my dad. Dad had been a pilot in the Army Air Corps in the 1930s when the Army Air Corps flew the airmail. And this cool picture shows my dad making it through with the first airmail to come from the West Coast into Newark. And why in the world were they the first ones to make it through? Here's this article mentions his big bomber. Well, here's a picture of his big bomber. This was the front-line bomber in 1934, the Keystone B-7 bomber. And you notice in this picture, it wasn't a very pretty day when they made it through. What happened was there had been a weather recall. They had a broken radio, so they didn't get the weather recall. So they pressed on through and made it with the first Western airmail. So naturally, I've got lots of pictures like this. My older brother and I sitting on a little toy out at the airport that used to exist in Cooperstown, New York, which is where I happened to be living when I was born. That's where I was born, was in Cooperstown, New York. Dad, when I was 10 years old, went to work for the FAA as a test pilot. He had just received his aeronautical engineering degree. So from the time I was 10 years old, I knew that I wanted to be an aeronautical engineer and I wanted to be a test pilot like my dad. And this was my dad's FAA test pilot school class. My dad is the second one from the left, Paul Gibson. And over the years, Dad got to fly a whole bunch of neat airplanes. This, I think, is a PL-4 that he was going out to fly some kind of a flight test in. I honestly don't know what he was doing with it, but he's wearing a parachute, so I'm guessing it was some kind of a risky flight, a structural test or something like that. Dad was my instructor. He had an instructor's rating, and so he was teaching me how to fly. And most of my flight time up to my private license, which I got when I was 17 years old, was in this airplane, which was a Luscombe 8A. And of course, I was involved with model airplanes. This was my control line Nobler that I had, and I couldn't afford RC at that time, so it was mostly all control line. This was my Vico Thunderbird that's almost finished. The canopy's not on it yet in this picture. And I got into a little bit of free flight as well. These pictures were all from when I was about 15 and 16 years old. So been involved in model aviation and the Academy of Model Aeronautics, AMA, ever since I was 15 years old. So it's just been a wonderful thing, and it taught me a lot. It teaches you a lot, as all of us know, about aerodynamics, about stability and control, and about all these things that are going to be real important to you if you find your way into flight training. And this was a picture from, God, I hate to admit how many years ago it was. So when I was first commissioned, this was my commissioning day as an ensign in the Navy, October the 17th of 1961. And I went on into flight training from there, of course. Okay, it was 1969. I'm really old. Went into flight training, and of course, Dad had been my instructor pilot, and Dad was there for my commissioning as well as when I received my wings. And I got to fly some neat things in the Navy. Got to fly the F-4 Phantom as my first assignment out of pilot training. Flew it in Southeast Asia in 1972 and then again in 1973. And also got to be in the very first operational F-14 squadron starting in late 1973 and made the first cruise with the F-14. Now most people don't realize it. We had one day of combat in Vietnam with the F-14s. We flew, and I say combat, it was quote combat. We flew air cover for the evacuation of Saigon, which was April the 30th of 1975. So the day that the Helicopters were landing on the embassy grounds and on rooftops all over Saigon. I was overhead in an F-14, loaded up with missiles and weapons just in case we needed to do something. In fact, we didn't need to do anything. They just wanted to let us go ahead and get our people and leave. So, had a pretty neat career in the Navy. My dad taught me how to fly airplanes. I taught my dad how to fly radio control. And this is a picture of us starting my craft, Quick Fly, I guess is what it was. Had that airplane for years and years and years. It was old, reliable. I mean, just flew time after time. And as I mentioned, I taught Dad how to fly RC. So Dad got into it. He got his own airplanes. He had a Senior Falcon, a Goldberg Senior Falcon that he flew a lot. Also had a Windward glider from Mark's Models, and got a lot of flight time in on that. And I got to spend a lot of really quality time with my dad, both in airplanes and also in RC flying. This was my F-16. I built a scratch-built model of the F-16, and my first one flew in 1975. I made my own mold and made a fiberglass fuselage for it. 75 was the same year that Bob Violet flew his first A4 Skyhawk ducted fan model. And then test pilot school got in my way, ruined my whole life, and it took me several years before I finished developing this one, which was my second version of the F-16. And I took this to the Nationals in 1981 and got third place in sports scale with it. I never did have Dad fly it because it was a little bit of a handful, and I crashed it a couple times, but I've still got it. To this day, I still have that model, and I want to convert it over to electric. And what a wonderful innovation electric ducted fans have been compared to the gas-powered fans where, man, you were working that needle valve trying to tweak it and get 21,500 RPM if you could, and then you'd get it up in the air and it would lean out in the air and you'd burn the glow plug and get to do a no-power landing. I did a whole bunch of those. And now electric, if you don't want to go that fast, just pull the power back a little bit. It is so slick doing the electric ducted fans now. And I built this model, and I'm going to show another picture of it later on. This was sort of an ambitious model. I think it's probably one of the most ambitious models I've ever attempted. Maybe that's why it still hasn't flown yet. But it's the Convair Pogo, and the first thing I did was I built the propeller mechanism for it, a contra-rotating propeller, and I took a bunch of helicopter gears and drive shafts and stuff like that, and a gentleman named Rube Goldberg helped me design the arrangement. And I've got an OS Max 61, I guess, going through a clutch and turning all of these gears and stuff, and it actually works. I made the prop, the contra-rotating propeller and the engine mechanism first because there was no sense in building the model unless I had a contra-rotating prop that I could fly it with. So I got all that to work, and I haven't made a whole lot of progress in it, and I'm thinking this is a good candidate to switch over to electric as well.